Sweet. Okay. Well, I'm going to let you kind of just take it because you want to talk about the 5 steps of, what is it? 5 steps of sequential evaluation?
That's
Is that what it's
right.
called? Okay. Well, I'm going to be part of the audience for this part because I kind of know what you're talking about, but I haven't actually done the research on the specifics because you said step 1 and 2 are pretty straightforward, but then 3, 4, 5 are a little bit more complicated.
They're a little bit more in detail.
All right.
Yeah. So we've talked about it in past interviews, and we've talked about, step 1, are you gainfully employed?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is no, they're not going to skip step 2. And they call it sequential evaluation because they literally are going to go in, that's the way all decision makers do it. It doesn't matter if it's a case worker, claims examiner at the lower levels, or it's an administrative law judge. They're going to use sequential evaluation. So the first step, and there's 5 steps. The first step is, are you gainfully employed? And if the answer is yes, you never get to step 2. But if the answer is no, I'm not gainfully employed, then you go to step 2. Do you have an impairment that is severe, or a combination of impairments that is severe? Of course, the same thing. If that answer is no, you don't have a severe impairment, they're not going to step 3. You're just going to be denied. But if you find out that you are having you do have a severe impairment,
Mm-hmm.
then the answer is yes, the step 2. Then you go to step 3. And step 3 is, do you have a condition that meets or equals a listing? And although I'm going to get to steps 4 and 5, I want to stop now and talk about the listings of impairments.
Mm-hmm.
Used to call it the Blue Book, and some people still call it the Blue Book. And the reason that they call that is because it literally used to be a blue book that had all of the impairments that somebody could have and meet a listing. They'd have to go through all sorts of criteria. They'd have to check all the boxes. And if they met that, there's not really a gray area. They would actually be disabled within the meaning of the law. Do you meet or equal a listing? So to give you some of the easiest examples would be a cancer that has metastasized beyond the regional lymph nodes. So let's say that you have lung cancer. Believe it or not, lung cancer in and of itself is not a disabling impairment all the time. It's highly treatable, and certain things can be done. It might not be severe enough to keep you out of work for that 12 months that you have to be out of work. Or if it's metastasized, but it's only metastasized to the pleura, which is like the sac your lungs hang in, or something regional, that may not be disabling or meet or equal a listing. However, if it has metastasized, which just means spread, if it has spread to an area beyond the regional lymph nodes, which it means it's migrated in your body, gone to the bone or gone to your brain, lungs to the liver, things like that, you meet a listing. And Social Security recognizes that that's probably, not always, but probably an impairment that is going to keep you out for a long time, or is probably going to result in death. Another listing level impairment would be a stroke. The vast majorities of strokes are recovered from. So to meet the listing, you would have to have the stroke, and then 3 or more months later, you still can't use 2 of your limbs, or you still can't communicate effectively. You have this aphasia, which if you've ever heard of somebody who has had a stroke, almost always immediately after the stroke, they have a hard time talking, a really hard time talking, like almost unintelligible. But then usually after a few months, they regain that ability, and thank goodness, most of the time they just regain it fully. But if you're one of those persons, those unlucky persons who get 3 or 4 months after the stroke, you still can't use 2 of your limbs the way you should, and you're still having hard times with this aphasia, which is just, you can't really be understood.
Like it's just a speech impairment.
Yeah. You meet a listing. A mental listing would be something along the lines of you have major depression, and You have episodes of decompensation, which means that you've probably been institutionalized. That's how they measure them usually. So in the span, usually it's a span of 2 years. You know, in the span of 2 years, if you've been institutionalized, and it's usually for more than a week, 3 or 4 times, that's indicative of a problem that's horrible. But it doesn't automatically meet a listing, because then you have to find out, do you have difficulties with concentration? Do you have difficulties getting along with other people? Do you have difficulties adapting to change? Do you have difficulties with memory, with understanding? And you have to have all of those things to meet the listing. So it's, the listings level impairments, you don't see a whole lot of them, especially people like me. We don't see a lot of them, because if you meet a listing, you're rarely going to get a denial notice, and you don't need a representative most of the time, unless you don't believe that you can get it by yourself, or you've been denied. So most of the calls we get are from people who have been denied, or who believe that they need help through the system.
Yeah, and I've actually had a few clients that are completely aware of that. They understand that they're almost definitely going to get approved, but they do still want our help filing it. Yeah. And we do help in that case.
Absolutely.
It's just generally we don't see those, but we are willing to help with them.
Right. And because of, there's the 5-month waiting period, which I believe we've talked about in prior episodes. Because of that, a lot of times they're going to get approved quickly. And for a representative, getting approved quickly is, a bittersweet thing. The sweet thing is I love it when my clients win. The bitter thing is that, my fee is based on their back pay. And if I win it rather quickly, and it's in within that 5 month waiting period, there won't be a fee at all. And if they don't get any back pay, I don't get any fee, but I'm okay with it, because that's
especially if you're terminal.
Absolutely.
If you're terminal,
it's
we'll
the
help you
right
out.
thing to do.
Yeah.
I've always done that from the day I hung a shingle and said, hey, I'm representing people. They came to me, and I'm like, I'm gonna win this case. Like that, I'd still take the case, and we still do. We probably do about 40 to 60 a year where we don't get paid on them, but it's the right thing to do. So that's meeting a listing. And, the listings are meeting or equaling. Equaling just means that decision makers got a little bit of room to fudge around with. We can fudge this, they weren't institutionalized, 3 times, but they were institutionalized 2 times, and it was for a really long period of time. Yeah. They may not meet the letter of the listing, but they equal it. So that is, what we mean by meeting or equaling the listing. And it really is kind of, you have to just check off these things, to do it. These are the most severe of the severe also. Like I said, we don't see a lot of that. We do see it, but we don't see a lot of that, because those cases are usually approved quickly before you need a representative to argue that, one, Social Security's made a mistake and you should have been approved already, or we have to go in front of a judge and make a pretty compelling argument that you either are allowed at step 5. So we've gone through the first 3. The first one, are you gainfully employed? No. Okay, let's go to step 2. Do you have a severe impairment? Yes. Okay, let's go to step 3. Do you meet or equal the listing? If it's yes, you're good. But if it's no, you go to step 4. And step 4 is, can you perform your past work? This is probably the biggest confusion that we see from our clients, especially somebody who's been in a job for 30 or 40 years. They can't do it anymore. And they're like, there's no way I could hang drywall anymore. I've done it for 30 years. Okay? And Social Security probably agrees with you, because hanging drywall is really heavy work. But they don't care, because at step 4, can you do your past work? If you can do your past work, you are not disabled. But if you can't do your past work, but you can still do other work, step 5, then you're not disabled. And The vast majority of cases that a representative is going to help you with is going to be convincing a judge or Social Security at the lower levels that you are disabled under step 5. You can't even do any other work. Now, if you're over 50 and you can't do your past work, you can get allowed there. But really, the bulk of our cases that we have to prove is that you can't do anything at all, and that's step 5. If you can't do your past work, it's step 4. Can you do other work? Step 5. If you can do other work and you're a younger individual, 49 or younger, then once again you're going to be denied. But if you can't do any other work, that's obvious. Then okay, now you have satisfied the criteria for step 5, and that's the last one. And that is the vast majority of cases that we represent. We have to prove to Social Security because they don't care that you can't do the drywall job anymore unless you're 58, and then they do care, and you probably win at step 4.
Right.
But if you're 38 and you've been doing it for 20 years, which is certainly plausible. You started when you were 18 as an apprentice, and you've been doing it for a long time. You're really good at it, and then you have a back injury, and there's just no way that you can lift those ridiculously heavy sheets of drywall. It makes me sound heartless when I say it, but I say it just for effect that Social Security doesn't care.
Yeah.
They don't care that you can't do your past work, especially if you're a younger individual. They only care if you can't do any kind of work. And that is, again, that's where the vast majority of our cases land. So that is a discussion of the 5 steps of sequential evaluation. A lot of people will read online about the compassionate allowances. Those are cases that really you don't have to do a lot of development on medical records. You just have to get some kind of documentation from a provider that you have this disease, Lou Gehrig's, things like that. There are compassionate allowance impairments, and what that just means is that you're not going to have to wait months and months and months and months for your case to wend its way through the system.
Yeah, or years.
And the kicker is that some cases that might be listings level might still take a while to get through there. For example, remember, I'm saying that, okay, you have lung cancer. I not only have to prove with documentation that you have lung cancer, I have to get the medical records with a pathology report showing that they've taken a biopsy and you have it. And then I have to get the medical records and a biopsy that shows that it's spread to the brain or it's spread to the liver or it's spread someplace else. I have to get all that still. Whereas the compassionate allowances it's designed for, you just need really a letter from a medical professional showing that you got it, and Social Security takes it from there. Right. So that's the 5 steps of sequential evaluation in a nutshell. And I know you wanted to talk about expedited cases. Mm-hmm. And
what we call Terry cases, like terminal.
Yeah, Terry cases. Yeah. It's TERI, which just literally stands for terminal illness. Terry cases are expedited at all levels, and what that literally means is that even though cases are electronic, back in the day when I was, still an employee of Social Security, a Terry case was literally you hand carried the paper file everywhere. For example, if you're giving it to a doctor to get some kind of rating, then you would walk it over to the doctor. You wouldn't put it on a desk and hope that somebody carried it. You carried it yourself. The doctor was supposed to bring it back to you, carry it, and these cases were meant to be handled expeditiously, and they still are, except now it's electronic, and usually they're flagged electronically that this case is a Terry case. And what it means is it kind of pops up to the top of the queue on a computer, and so whoever's handling that's the case that's at the top of the queue, and that's the case that should be handled quickly. What we find is that Doesn't always happen that way, and that's where a representative comes in, because we will, figuratively speaking, tap Social Security on the shoulder and sometimes rap them on the head. Hey,
Kind of go like, come on, guys.
Why haven't you finished this case?
Yep.
He's probably not going to make it to Christmas. It would be nice for his family to get something before he passes, and that happens far too often. But it is what it is. But a Terry case is expeditiously handled. You can request expedited. We can request it for any reason, but you're only really going to get any kind of traction if there's two. And I think might be three. I think that you've done some research on that, but the two.
We'll say two main ways.
The two main ways are if it's a terminal case. If I'm terminal, and usually what happens here is if you're terminal and then you apply for disability at your local office when you apply, or if you apply online, it's flagged immediately. Mm-hmm. What we normally see, however, is they apply for something, that I have COPD, and then through the course of some treatment, they find out it's not just COPD. You've got cancer, or you've got some other stuff, and it's you're probably terminal, and then we can flag it, and that's what happens. We basically tell Social Security, listen, this is what his doctors told him, and we need to flag that as a Terry case, and they're usually really good about doing that. So that's one. But the other one is if you are facing eviction or foreclosure, and of course foreclosure would mean eviction, and you have to provide the eviction notice, or you have to provide the foreclosure notice. And these notices have to have a date on them when you're going to be booted out. It can't be a letter from a bank that, you're 3 months behind and you need to catch up on your mortgage. That's not a foreclosure notice, right. And that will get you no traction with Social Security. It has to be, they have to know, okay, this person's literally facing homelessness, and let's expedite his case. So having said that, and those are the two main ways that I know of. Having said that, we need to define the term expedite. Yeah. Because quick to you and I is something completely different to a big bloated bureaucracy. Most of the time, what we see when we want something expedited in Social Security, and we're used to 8 or 9 or 12 months, we get 4 or 5 months. Sometimes it's better than that, but not that often. It's more like sometimes. And once again, it can be for a lot of different reasons, but usually it's going to be just staffing issues. Right. They're poorly staffed. They have been ever since I've been with disability. I've been involved now for 34 years, and I mean the first day we were told that they're staffed at mid 70s levels, and that hasn't changed. Here we are in 2025, and they're still staffed at that level. And population has just exploded. People needing benefits that they provide, and it's not just disability. Keep in mind that your local office does tremendous more than just disability cases. They do Social Security card replacement. They do, you get a marriage, you change your name, you have to get new documentation. They do retirement. They do, survivors benefits. They do all sorts of stuff. Yeah. And we kind of I think we get myopic when we're like, okay, well, I handle disability, and therefore the Social Security office, that's all they're doing a whole lot more than that. And I don't defend them very much, but, when you got staffing issues, you got staffing issues.
Makes sense, yeah.
If you give your full attention to your job, that's the best that you can do, and I'm usually pretty cool with that. But I still will rap them on the head or tap them nicely on the shoulder that sure. My client, this person is they're going to lose their home. I have provided the documentation that showed you this is the date that the sheriff's office is going to come in there and, kick them out. What can you do to speed up this decision? But like I said, 3 to 4 months is usually what you're looking at for an expedited treatment.
Yeah, I usually, when I talk to clients that do fit that criteria of either having a terminal illness or meeting a listing or their dire needs, so they are on the brink of eviction or foreclosure, I really don't want to word it like, oh, we can expedite your case,
Right.
because I don't want to guarantee that we can do anything, because what we do as a representative firm and what they would do as a client if they don't have a representative is that they would send the eviction notice, or they would send the foreclosure notice, or they would file like normal with a terminal diagnosis, and then they would put a note in there that it's a terminal diagnosis.
Right.
And that's pretty much, other than, like you said, every once in a while calling Social Security or contacting Social Security and asking them, what the hell's going on here? It's been way longer than it should have been. That's pretty much all we can do.
Right.
And so I don't want to tell a client, oh, you're terminal, we can get you approved in 2 months. We can expedite your case, because that's how it should work, and that's what we're going to try to do. But at the end of the day, we're still kind of, we are at the mercy of Social Security,
Sure.
whether you're terminal, whether you have a non-terminal diagnosis, if it's mental health, if it's physical health, if you're receiving other benefits, we're still at the mercy of Social Security. So there's just not that much we can do. And then another thing that I want to be really clear about, like you talked about, with the 5 steps of sequential evaluation, it's sequential. And so what that means is step 3 doesn't matter until 1 and 2.
That's right.
And it seems like what you're talking about with expediting cases, we're really just talking about steps 3, 4, 5. Because step 1, if you're still working, then it doesn't matter if you're terminal, and it doesn't matter if you're, somehow about to get evicted, even though you're working
Right.
full time.
Right.
So even if you have terminal cancer or something like that, they still have to verify that you're not working full time. They still have to verify that you are who you say you are, identity checks, all this other stuff. So it's not like you submit the application and then it's like that.
Right.
Best case scenario, well, I don't even want to put any time frame on it, but we're probably still looking at multiple months
Yeah.
before we get an approval.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost pointless to say that, there have been cases that, I've won in 3 or 4 weeks, even though there have been, but that just happens so rarely
Yeah,
that it's
I don't wanna-
statistically not significant.
I don't want to get people's hopes up,
Yeah, it's just, it takes a long time, because there are thousands, not hundreds, thousands of cases that have been pending in any Social Security decision makers facility, whether it be a disability determination section in Nashville, Tennessee, which usually has 20 or 30,000 cases pending at any given time, or a hearing office, which usually has anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 cases pending at any given time. And it's just unreasonable to say, well, hey, this is my client's case. You move him to the front of the line.
Yeah.
It's unrealistic to believe that that's going to happen. But still, if you do meet the criteria for expedition, we certainly will do it. And like I said, and we can be pretty good pests to Social Security, calling them all the time to hey, don't forget about this case. This is, but it's the number one call that we get from our clients. Why is it taking so long? That's the number one call that we get from our clients. And the number one call the Social Security Administration gets from everybody else is, why is it taking so long?
Yeah.
And it's a great question. If I was in my client's shoes, it would absolutely be a call that I'm making too. So I get it. I do not begrudge anybody who calls our office and, why is it taking so long? I train my people. tell them the truth. You just absolutely tell them the truth, and make sure that they know that we are pressing Social Security as best we can.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, if there's 4,000 cases ahead of you, and the office has 30 workers, you can do the math.
Yeah.
It's going to take a while. So, but that's the 5 steps of sequential evaluation. Some examples of expedition and stuff like that. That is, that's basically the way that Social Security was laid out long before you and I cared, before we even thought about it. And it's worked pretty good. I think, it makes sense to me that you walk through those levels. And I don't think there's anything confusing about it. And it's one of the few things that they really haven't changed through the years. They've changed the listings. The listings, unfortunately, they always change them to damage the claimant. I mean, make it harder. We used to have this A, B, and C thing that you had to have, and now it's A, B, C, and there's 5 other things under C that you have to have. They've changed listings. They've removed listings. There used to be an obesity listing. There's no obesity listing anymore. There used to be a diabetes listing. There's not a diabetes listing anymore. You still can have it. You can still have problems with it, but those kinds of things. They've just made it more difficult, but they haven't changed the actual sequential evaluation, and that's a good thing. They haven't pulled out the rug from under us yet.
Yeah, I think that this is also a good place to fit in talking about technical denials a little bit, as far as your earnings report, as far as not paying FICA taxes,
Right.
Other reasons that you would get a technical denial. A lot of a lot of leads that I talk to that don't turn into clients, they're trying to convince me that they're eligible because of their medical condition, but I'm positive they're not eligible because of their technical situation, which is their work history and work status. For SSDI is your work history,
Right.
or for SSI, like they're receiving $4,000 from the VA. Like, listen, I'm just positive that you don't qualify for SSI.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're telling me about your diabetes and your neuropathy, and listen, I believe you. And if you technically qualified, then we would take your case because we could prove that. But yeah, the step 1 and 2 are those. Was a technical denial only for step 1 and 2, or could it technically be like what? Can you define what a technical denial is first? It's probably a better way to do it.
Technical denial is a denial that has nothing to do with your medical condition.
Okay, yeah.
There are 2 kinds of denials you can get in Social Security. You can get a technical denial, or you can get a medical denial. But the technical denials, the catch-22 that a lot of people find themselves in, especially if they're married, is, let's say that they haven't, and this will usually be, wife, that she hasn't worked in a while, and therefore she doesn't have the earnings to qualify for SSDI. Okay, well, she's got this horrible impairment, really horrible impairment, and so let's apply for SSI. Well, her husband works, and all of his money is deemed to her. I mean, the income and resource limit.
It's household.
It's household income, and there are some breaks if it's earned income, but it's not enough to make it to where she would be technically eligible for either SSDI because of her own lack of earnings in the last few years, and she's not going to be eligible for SSI because of her spouse's earnings or income. If he gets, if he gets earnings, they count half of it. If he gets unearned income, VA benefits, a pension, they count all of it. Unearned income, they counted all of it. That happens a lot, and again, I can imagine, I don't do a whole lot of intake, but I can imagine you get a lot of those kinds of complaints. Well, Elijah, I have these conditions.
Yep.
Yeah, but we're never, we've talked about this. They're never going to get there. It's technical denial. They won't get there. Some other technical denials that we haven't talked about is you didn't send in the attestation form. So you call them or you call us usually, and we make the application online, and they send you an attestation. Yes, disability consulting is representing me. Yes, they're the ones who applied for me. Yes, the information that they put in the computer is correct, and therefore, let's get this thing launched. But you don't do it. You just, I don't want to do it, or I'll get around to it. And like everything in Social Security, there is a deadline, and you miss the deadline, and you are technically denied. They're not going to process your case because you did not attest to all the information that you were supposed to. Some people, SSIs, they have to have an appointment. So we could literally, and this happens, we can literally make the application online, but they still don't launch an SSI application until they have interviewed you. What they're usually doing is they're trying to make sure you don't have a bank account that makes you over, you don't have any kind of resources that puts you over. They ask all these kinds of questions, your household income, stuff like that. They have to interview you. And so normally we'll actually set that up too. Can you please, give Mr. Smith an interview? And they'll say, yeah, we have an opening on, November the 16th at 9 a.m. We'll let him know, but make sure you let him know. And we'll call him, hey, Mr. Smith, we've got you at an appointment. Make sure that you're by your phone. They're going to do everything by phone. You don't have to go in. Everything by phone. Just make sure that you answer the phone. And Mr. Smith doesn't answer the phone.
Yeah, he sleeps until 11 a.m. and misses it.
Yeah, he misses the call, and they send a letter, you missed a call, and he doesn't respond to that, and nothing happens. It's a technical denial. Well, how could you deny me? I have all these conditions. You didn't do anything.
Yeah, you missed your appointment.
All you're supposed to do is cooperate, and you didn't do that. So those are the things that we see. Unfortunately, we see a lot of those these days where people don't want to attest to the application that we've made, or they don't want to keep the appointment, or maybe they want to, but they just don't do it. And you're just shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, you don't pick up where you left off. You start all over. And this is going to make me sound even harsher than most of these podcasts make me sound. But if you've done that to us, to where we have filed your case and we have set you up an appointment, and you miss all that, or we have done this and they send you the attestation form and you don't say, yeah, everything's looking good and let's launch this case. If you don't do that and then you get denied, and then a couple months later you're like, I thought I was applying for disability, and so you call us up, hey, no, you missed all this stuff. Oh, well, do I just, pick up where I left off? No, you have to start all over. Oh, okay, well, can you guys do that for me? No. Once bitten, twice shy. I have far too many clients that I'm going to just keep redoing things.
Yeah, unless it's a really good reason.
There are
like if
good
they had
reasons.
a heart attack.
Yeah,
or something.
There's really good reasons we'll do that. But if you just, if you can't help us help you, it's going to be a problem probably throughout the entire claims process, and we'll likely have enough and cut you loose, or whatever.
Yeah, does the same thing happen with other forms? Because the attestation form is basically the client just giving Social Security a thumbs up that they really do want to hire us and start the case. Yeah. But then after that, there's like the earnings form.
The attestation is pretty much everything. It's
okay.
This is where I work. This is my wife's name. These are my kids. The attestation is basically everything that went on the application, because the application is really long. I mean, it's not one of those things you go in and 5 minutes later you've applied. It's you have to put in a tremendous amount of information. You have to list the medical sources and their addresses and their phone numbers and the dates of treatment. You have to do all that kind of stuff. I mean, it takes us a long time to file a claim. And that's why I'm kind of,
if we go through all that.
We do all that, and then you can't attest to it, because that's literally, this is right. Or if there's a correction, well, no, I got married on this date, not that date, and you guys got it wrong, or, we made a typo or something like that. They correct it on the attestation, and it's done. So when it gets back to Social Security, they correct it, and life is good for everybody.
No problem.
Yeah. And, So it's important that they do that. But yeah, I mean, it's not just, the personal identifying information on it. It's a lot of stuff. I mean, and they have to attest to it. They have to say, yeah, that's correct. It's not just we want them to represent us. It's okay, we want them to represent us. Plus, they've applied, and the things that they put on this application are the things that I told them, and yeah, that's true, and those are the people that I see, and that's my education, and that's the last time I worked, and that's the name of the place that I worked when I worked, and all that stuff. It's just a tremendous amount of information that goes on there, and so Social Security wants to make sure that they got it right so they can make the best decision possible. So that's what the attestation is for.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so to recap, 5 stages of sequential evaluation. Stage 1, is it step 1, stage 1? Step 1.
There's steps.
Step 1 and step 2 are more technical. Make sure you're not working, fill out the forms, attest to the claim, and then we'll move on to step 3, 4, and 5, which is the medical stuff. You don't get to the medical stuff if you're still working full time. You don't get to the medical stuff if you don't technically qualify for some other reason. Mm-hmm. And you might be able to expedite your case. The 2 main ways that we know of are dire needs, which is like an eviction notice or foreclosure, or a Terry case, which is a terminal impairment or something that would result in is expected to result in death. Yeah. And I'm going to say those are the main reasons. I'm not going to look at the camera and say, and that's it, period. Because there's going to be people that's like, well, I had, my Aunt Betty, Right. It's like
there's always the Aunt Betty.
Yeah, my girlfriend's mom's sister's friend, wrote a letter to Congress and then got approved in a month or in 2 weeks. Like, okay, maybe that happened.
Possibly.
I've never heard of that. I guess it's possible. But the 2 probable ways that we know are eviction or foreclosure notice or Terry cases.
Right. That is correct.
Yeah, so I think that pretty much covers it. Is there anything else you want to wrap up with?
No, I think we're good.
Cool. All right. It was pretty to the point.
Was I too to the point?
No, I think that was good. That was helpful.